"You've been so cold lately," she said, her voice flat, almost accusing. It was a line that cut deep, not because I felt guilty, but because it was the exact opposite of what I felt. And more importantly, it was the opposite of what had happened. For months, I had been the one reaching, the one trying to thaw a rapidly freezing landscape between us. I had chased her affection, her attention, her presence, only to be met with a wall that grew higher and thicker with each passing week. So when she finally looked at me with that hurt expression, I realized that her complaint wasn't about termite coldness, but about the absence of termite chase. It was the moment I understood she wasn't missing me. She was missing my effort to keep her warm, an effort she no longer had to reciprocate. Our marriage hadn't always been like this. Sarah and I had been together for 10 years, married for 7. We met in college, two ambitious, slightly nerdy kids who found comfort and laughter in each other. Our early years were full of shared dreams, late-night talks, and the kind of easy affection that makes you believe in forever. We built a life together, a nice house, stable careers, a comfortable routine. We didn't have kids, a mutual decision early on, which meant more freedom for travel and focusing on our careers, which we both enjoyed. I truly thought we had something special, something resilient. The change started subtly, almost imperceptibly, about 8 months ago. It wasn't a fight or a specific argument, it was more like a slow, emotional drift. She became less present, even when we were in the same room. I'd try to start a conversation about my day, and she'd nod absently, scrolling through her phone. I'd suggest a weekend getaway, and she'd say she was too busy with work, or too tired. There were always excuses, always a reason why she couldn't fully engage. I noticed the physical distance first. Our couch cuddles became rarer, then non-existent. She'd go to bed earlier than me, or stay up later, claiming she needed to finish something. When we did go to bed at the same time, the old habit of holding each other for a few minutes before drifting off just stopped. There was an invisible line down the middle of the bed, and she was always on her side, facing away. I tried to bridge it sometimes, reaching for her hand, or gently pulling her closer. Most times she'd tense up, offer a quick, tired pat on my arm, and turn further away. I interpreted it as stress. Sarah was a senior manager at a marketing firm, and her job was demanding. I had my own demanding job in software development, but I always made time for us. I understood work stress, but her level of withdrawal felt different. I'd ask her about her workload, offer to help with chores, suggest a relaxing evening. She'd just brush it off, saying she was fine, just tired. But her eyes seemed to hold a flicker of something else, something I couldn't quite place, a kind of impatience perhaps, or a desire to be left alone. I tried to initiate conversations about our relationship too. I'd say, "Hey, I feel like we haven't really connected lately. Is everything okay?" She'd give me a bewildered look, as if I was making something out of nothing. "Of course, everything's fine, Mark. Why wouldn't it be? I'm just busy." Or, "You're overthinking things. Let's just relax." It was always a deflection, a gentle pushback that made me feel like I was creating problems where there were none. Her calm dismissals made me doubt my own feelings, made me wonder if I was being too sensitive, too needy. The physical affection dried up completely. Kisses became pecks on the cheek, then just a quick brush of lips. Our intimate life, which had always been passionate and frequent, dwindled to once a month, then once every 2 months, always initiated by me, and often feeling forced. It wasn't a sudden stop, but a slow erosion. I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't attractive enough anymore. Maybe I wasn't doing enough around the house. I tried harder, worked out more, bought her flowers, cooked her favorite meals. Nothing seemed to change the impenetrable wall she'd built around herself. After 6 months of this, I was exhausted, emotionally drained. I had tried everything I could think of. I had communicated, I had pursued, I had given her space, I had tried to reignite the spark. Every single attempt had been met with a subtle resistance that gradually wore me down. I felt like a fool, constantly begging for attention from the woman who was supposed to be my partner. The rejection, though unspoken, was loud and clear. So I stopped. I stopped initiating conversations. I stopped suggesting dates. I stopped reaching for her hand. I stopped trying to force intimacy. I just existed. I focused on my own life, my hobbies, my friends. I still came home, did my chores, helped around the house, but the emotional energy I once poured into us, I now redirected. I became quieter, less effusive. I wasn't angry or resentful. I was just profoundly tired and resigned. I accepted that this was our new normal, a quiet, parallel existence. That's when she started complaining. "You're so quiet lately. You don't talk to me anymore. Why are you so distant?" I couldn't believe it. The very things she had been for months, she was now projecting onto me. It was like she was reading from a script I'd been living. Her sudden concern wasn't about our relationship. It was about samay. It was about my failure to continue chasing her when she had made it so abundantly clear she didn't want to be caught. "I'm just giving you the space you seem to want," I replied one evening, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. We were in the kitchen, me doing dishes, her scrolling on her phone, as usual. She looked up, her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? I never asked for space." Her tone was genuinely confused, or at least, a very convincing imitation of it. It made me question my sanity for a moment. Had I imagined it all? The turning away, the deflections, the constant busy excuses. This was around 2 months ago. The coldness accusations started then, and they continued. Each time she brought it up, I felt a fresh wave of bewilderment. I had gone from being the desperate husband, trying to fix things, to the cold, distant husband, who was suddenly the problem. It was a complete reversal, and it made no sense. Why would she suddenly care about my emotional temperature when she had been so frigid for so long? Her behavior began to feel less like a phase of stress and more like a deliberate act. She wasn't just distant, she was actively annoyed by my presence sometimes. If I walked into a room she was in, she'd often sigh softly or shift her phone away from my view. She started taking more phone calls in the other room, often speaking in hushed tones. When I'd ask who it was, she'd say, "Just work," or "It's nobody important." The phone itself became an extension of her, constantly in her hand, face down when she put it on a surface, often taken with her even if she was just going to the bathroom. I noticed a new energy about her too. Sometimes, after one of those hushed phone calls, or after an evening out with friends, which were becoming more frequent, she'd return with a lightness in her step, a subtle glow I hadn't seen directed at me in nearly a year. Her eyes would sparkle, and she'd be humming to herself, but the moment she saw me, that glow would dim, replaced by the familiar tired mask. It was like she had 2 different lives, and I was only part of the less exciting one. This stark contrast between her outward energy and her energy towards me began to gnaw at me. It wasn't just coldness, it was a performance. She was performing a detached wife for me, while clearly having vibrant interactions elsewhere. It started to feel less like she was pushing me away because she was stressed, and more like she was pushing me away because she needed me out of the way. She needed the emotional space. She needed me to stop trying so she could do whatever she was doing unburdened by my attention. The accusations of my coldness felt like a shield, a way to deflect any potential questions about awareness behavior. It put me on the defensive, making me feel guilty and forcing me to explain myself, rather than giving me the chance to question her. It was a brilliant, if cruel, tactic. It made me doubt my own perceptions, made me wonder if I was truly the problem. But deep down, a new, unsettling thought began to form. She didn't want a partner anymore. She wanted a silent, compliant housemate who wouldn't interfere. And the more I considered it, the more I feared what that really meant she was doing with all that newly created emotional space. The accusations of coldness felt like a shield, a way to deflect any potential questions about Twayden behavior. It put me on the defensive, making me feel guilty and forcing me to explain myself, rather than giving me the chance to question her. It was a brilliant, if cruel, tactic. It made me doubt my own perceptions, made me wonder if I was truly the problem. But deep down, a new, unsettling thought began to form. She didn't want a partner anymore. She wanted a silent, compliant housemate who wouldn't interfere. And the more I considered it, the more I feared what that really meant she was doing with all that newly created emotional space. Sarah didn't let up. The complaints about my distance became a regular refrain, a background hum in our apartment. She'd say it over dinner, her voice flat, barely looking up from her plate. She'd mention it when I was trying to read, a sigh punctuating her words. It wasn't an attempt to open a dialogue, to bridge the gap. It was a statement, a verdict already delivered. There was no, "How can we fix this?" Just, "You are cold." Each time, I felt myself withdraw further. Not because I was giving up on her, but because I was giving up on the idea of us, that she kept insisting was broken by told strid actions. Her phone habits escalated. Before, she'd take calls in the other room. Now it was a constant companion. It went with her to the bathroom, always face down on the nightstand when she slept, never left unattended on the kitchen counter. I'd catch her scrolling, a faint, private smile on her face that vanished the moment she sensed my presence. She'd snap it closed, or quickly switch apps, a practiced move. There were times I'd walk into a room, and she'd flinch, pulling the phone closer to her chest like a precious secret. One evening, I reached for my own phone, which was on the charging cable next to hers. Sarah instantly reached for her phone, pulling it away. Her eyes were wide, almost startled. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharper than necessary. I just looked at her, then at my phone. "Charging my phone," I said, my voice flat. She mumbled an apology, a half-hearted excuse about being startled, but the damage was done. The defensiveness was palpable, and it solidified my growing suspicion that whatever was on that device was not meant for my eyes. Her schedule started to subtly shift. What began as late nights at work every now and then became more frequent. Then they turned into client dinners, followed by networking events. The excuses were always vague, always just plausible enough. She'd come home late, sometimes past midnight, and slip into bed without a word. There was no more casual talk about her day, no details about these events. Just a tired shrug if I asked, or a pointed remark about how busy her job was, implying I wouldn't understand. I noticed a change in her appearance, too. Nothing dramatic, no sudden new wardrobe. But she started putting in more effort on certain days. Her hair was styled differently, a new, lighter perfume. She'd meticulously check her outfit in the mirror before leaving, a level of scrutiny I hadn't seen in years. Yet, when she was home, alone with me, she'd be in sweatpants and a t-shirt, completely unconcerned with how she looked. It wasn't about looking good for herself, or for us. It was about looking good for someone else. The contrast between her energy when she left the house and when she returned was stark. She'd leave with a nervous excitement, a light in her eyes that had long gone missing when she was around me. She'd come back looking, satisfied but also guarded. That glow, I'd noticed in part one, it was still there sometimes, but it was quickly extinguished the moment she saw me. It was like she was putting on a different persona for me, reverting to the tired, distant wife I had become accustomed to, pushing her vibrant self back behind a wall. I tried to initiate conversation about our lives, our plans. Simple things, like what we might do on the weekend, or even just asking about her day beyond the generic busy. She would deflect, or give one-word answers, or suddenly remember something urgent she had to do. It became clear she wasn't interested in engaging. Not with me, not about our shared life. It was as if she was meticulously maintaining an emotional distance, ensuring no accidental intimacy could break through her carefully constructed barriers. Then came a new detail. I was in the living room one Saturday morning, reading the paper when Sarah came in, getting ready to leave. "Going to meet up with Clara," she said, pulling on her jacket. "Clara?" I blinked. We had mutual friends, but Clara wasn't one of them. "Clara?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, she's a new colleague. We're grabbing coffee," she replied, a little too quickly. She didn't offer any more information, just grabbed her keys and left. I thought about Clara. I'd never heard of her before. Was it a new colleague or a convenient name? Later that week, I saw a receipt on the counter for a rather expensive bottle of wine. It wasn't our usual brand, and we hadn't had guests recently. I asked Sarah about it, genuinely curious. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just something I picked up for a work thing. A client gift." She sounded vague, almost rehearsed. A client gift? Our clients never received wine from Sarah's firm. It was usually branded merchandise or gift certificates. This felt like another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The accusations from Sarah continued, hitting me like small, persistent pebbles. She'd occasionally sigh, "I just wish you were more present, Mark," or "I miss the way we used to be." It was a bizarre inversion of reality. She was the one who had disappeared, emotionally and often physically, yet she pinned the blame squarely on me. It was a masterful performance, one that made me, for a brief moment, question my sanity. Was I truly so oblivious, so cold, that I had driven her to this? But the new Clara, the expensive wine, the constant phone secrecy, the guarded return home, the lack of any real effort to mend things on her part, it all started to coalesce into a disturbing picture. Her blaming me was no longer just confusing. It felt strategic. It put me in a state of self-doubt and defensiveness, distracting me from the real issue. It kept my eyes on my own perceived failings, rather than on her increasingly opaque life. And the more I noticed, the more I feared what she was truly protecting. I started to understand that her silence wasn't about pain, it was about opportunity. And my silence, the one she blamed me for, was just clearing the stage for her. The feeling of bewilderment had faded, replaced by something colder, more focused. Sarah's accusations of my distance no longer pierced me. Instead, they echoed like a practiced script, a sound intended to cover up a deeper truth. My own silence had become less about pain and more about strategic observation. I watched her, not with the hope of reconciliation, but with a detached curiosity, trying to decipher the true meaning behind her every move. Her phone remained a constant, almost physical barrier between us. It was always nearby, always face down, always muted. If I walked into a room where she was using it, her thumb would instinctively swipe it shut, a flicker of something, panic, annoyance, secrecy, crossing her face before she'd offer a strained smile or a quick empty question about my day. I tried to be subtle, to catch a glimpse of the screen, but she was too quick. It was like watching a magician's trick, always seeing the misdirection, never the sleight of hand. Her late nights became more frequent, the explanations more vague. A new project at work, a networking event, a client dinner. They were always plausible enough on their own, but when stacked one after another, they formed an unconvincing narrative. She'd leave the house in clothes she'd clearly spent time selecting, hairstyled, a vibrant energy about her. But when she'd return, sometimes well past midnight, that energy would be gone, replaced by a quiet weariness. She'd move through the house like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, heading straight to bed, often without even a perfunctory good night. The contrast between the woman leaving and the woman returning was stark, like two different people occupying the same skin. I started to pay closer attention to the name Clara. Sarah had mentioned her as a new colleague, someone she'd been collaborating with, but the name started to pop up in slightly odd contexts. Clara and I were discussing, or Clara thinks we should. It felt less like a work colleague and more like a confidant. One evening, after Sarah had gone to bed, I decided to do a casual search. I typed Sarah Miller and Clara into a social media site, adding her company's name. It took a few tries, but I found her. Clara appeared to be a few years younger than Sarah, with a bright, open smile. There were a few photos of them together at what looked like company events. Perfectly innocent. But then I noticed something subtle. A small group photo from a team-building retreat 3 months ago. Sarah was in the background, looking uncomfortable. But then a more recent photo, just 2 weeks old, posted by Clara, showed them at a different event, Sarah's arm casually linked through Clara's, both smiling. Very close. Sarah looked genuinely happy, a relaxed, easy smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. It was a fleeting image, but it stuck with me. The wine bottle from earlier still bothered me. She'd said it was a client gift, and I'd let it go. But a few days later, I was cleaning out some old papers from her desk, something she rarely did, and found a small, crumpled receipt tucked beneath a stack of invoices. It was from a high-end gourmet food shop I knew, a place that sold artisanal cheeses and expensive, niche imported items. The date on the receipt was 2 days before she claimed to have received the wine as a client gift, and the itemized list clearly showed a bottle of that specific expensive Barolo. It wasn't a gift received, it was a gift purchased. Not for me, clearly. Not for a client, if she was buying it and then claiming it was received. The logical conclusion was that she'd purchased it such or for someone. This small discovery felt like a physical blow. It wasn't definitive, but it confirmed a pattern of active deception. Her words were not just misdirections. They were outright untruths designed to manage my perception. She wasn't just pulling away. She was actively constructing a facade. I started to notice smaller things that, before, I would have dismissed. Her car mileage. It seemed higher than usual for her office commute and claimed outings. The radio dial was often tuned to a station she never listened to, usually talk radio. Small, irrelevant details, but in my hyper-aware state, they began to accumulate. They were like tiny grains of sand, each insignificant alone, but together starting to form a dune. The emotional distance between us was no longer a mystery to me. It was a wall she had built, brick by brick, with each dismissal, each accusation, each carefully crafted lie. She wasn't trying to understand why I was cold. She was using my perceived coldness as a tool. It made me defensive, it made me question myself, and most importantly, it kept me distracted from her. It bought her time, space, and freedom. One Tuesday evening, she told me she had to work late, a new project with Clara. I nodded, feigning indifference, but I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. Later, around 8 p.m., I decided to take a drive. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to move. I found myself heading towards the upscale part of downtown, where Sarah's office building was. It was a foolish impulse, I knew, but I couldn't stop myself. Her office parking lot was mostly empty, as expected for that hour, but as I slowly cruised by, I saw her car, parked not in her usual spot but tucked away near the far end, almost hidden, and as I drove past, I noticed something else. The passenger side window was slightly ajar. I knew she was meticulous about locking her car and closing all windows. It was a small detail, but it screamed hurry or distraction. I drove around the block, telling myself I was being ridiculous. But something compelled me to go back. I parked a few streets away and walked towards her car. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the air was cool. As I got closer, I could still see the window. I hesitated, my heart thumping. This felt wrong, invasive, but the alternative, the gnawing uncertainty, felt worse. I peered into the car, trying to see if anything was out of place. The usual work bag was on the passenger seat, but tucked beneath it, partially visible, was a small, brightly colored gift bag. Not a client gift bag, but one of those boutique-style ones, with tissue paper peeking out. It looked new, untouched. It wasn't for me. It was too feminine, too cheerful, not something she would bring home for me, especially after her recent behavior. I felt a cold dread spread through me. The expensive wine purchased for someone, the close photo with Clara, the hidden gift bag in her car after a late work night. It was all starting to connect, forming a coherent, horrifying narrative. She wasn't just pushing me away. She was building another life, actively seeking emotional intimacy elsewhere, all while keeping me in a holding pattern, blaming me for the very distance she created. As I walked back to my car, the reality solidified. Her silence wasn't about opportunity, it was a calculated performance, and my silence, the one she so readily condemned, was the only defense I had left against her elaborate deception. I had become the complacent housemate, and she was simply waiting for the right moment to make her next move, whatever that might be. The gift bag, bright and incongruous in the dim interior of her car, was a promise to someone else, and I, her husband, was simply in the way. The gift bag in Sarah's car wasn't a smoking gun, not in the way a hotel keycard or a diamond ring might be. It was worse. It was a clear, vivid splash of color in the otherwise gray landscape of her emotional distance. It wasn't for me, or for us. It was a bright, joyful declaration of affection intended for someone else, something she felt no need to hide from the world, only from me. The realization settled in me like a block of ice, cold and heavy, confirming everything I had suspected. I was no longer just the husband. I was an inconvenient obstacle, a placeholder. I drove home, the silence in my car matching the one I felt within myself. The dread had transformed into a cold, focused resolve. There was no more confusion, no more doubt to torment me. Just the hard, undeniable truth. I knew what I had to do, and more importantly, I knew why I had to do it. Sarah would be home late, as usual. I decided to wait for her, not with anger, but with an eerie calm. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't accuse. I would simply lay out the pieces of the puzzle she had so carefully, yet carelessly, scattered. She arrived just after 11, the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway. I heard her keys jingle, the door opening and closing. The house felt smaller, colder as her presence entered it. She walked into the living room, surprised to find me still awake, sitting on the couch in the dim light. Her expression flickered between surprise and annoyance, then settled on a familiar defensive posture. "Mark, what are you doing up? Is everything okay?" Her voice was modulated, a hint of concern that felt entirely performative. I looked at her, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time in months. She still had that faint glow I'd noticed, the one that faded the moment she saw me. Her hair was still perfectly styled, a little more effort than she usually put in for a late meeting. "We need to talk, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. I didn't want her to interpret it as an attack, just a statement of fact. She shifted, crossing her arms. "Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm exhausted. It's been a long day." The usual brush-off. "No, it can't," I replied, not raising my voice. "It's about everything. About us." She sighed, a weary performance. "Mark, we've been over this. You've been so distant lately. So cold. It's like you don't even care anymore. I don't know what you want me to do." It was her standard script, the one designed to make me feel guilty, to make me chase, to make me apologize. I let her finish, then spoke. "You're right, I have been distant," I conceded, watching her carefully. "But not because I stopped caring. Because I stopped trying to break through the wall you built. I stopped chasing you when you kept pushing me away." She frowned, sensing the shift in my tone. This wasn't the usual argument. "That's not fair, Mark. I've been trying. I've been stressed at work, and you just retreat further into yourself. Is that why you've been spending so much time with Clara?" I asked, my voice still even. The name hung in the air, a small, controlled detonation. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine surprise before the mask snapped back into place. "Clara? What does Clara have to do with anything? She's a colleague, a friend. I mentioned her to you." "You did," I acknowledged. "You also mentioned her when you bought that expensive bottle of wine for a client gift. Only the receipt I found wasn't for a client. It was for you, and it was paired with flowers." She scoffed, a brittle, dismissive sound. "You're going through my things now, Mark. Are you insane? This is why I can't talk to you. You're paranoid." I saw the photos, Sarah, I continued, ignoring her deflection. The ones on social media, with you and Clara. Your arm linked through hers, laughing. You haven't laughed like that with me in years. And you haven't looked at me with that much warmth in your eyes since before all of this started. Her face went pale. The accusations had stopped. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze darting around the room, avoiding mine. It's not what you think, she mumbled, a weak defense. Isn't it? I pressed. Your phone, always face down, always muted, always with you. Your late nights, vague excuses, coming home tired but looking like you just stepped out of a magazine. The extra mileage on your car, the radio station set to something you never listened to. And today, I saw the gift bag in your passenger seat. Bright pink, not exactly a corporate gift. She stared at me, her defenses crumbling around her. She didn't deny it, didn't try to explain away the gift bag. She just looked lost, cornered. The air crackled with unspoken truths. You pushed me away for months, I stated, my voice almost a whisper, but firm. You wanted space. You wanted distance. And when I finally gave up trying to close that gap, when I finally accepted the distance you created, you turned around and blamed me for being cold, for giving you exactly what you wanted. She finally met my gaze, her eyes hard, devoid of the fake vulnerability she often used. What did you expect, Mark? You changed. You stopped trying. I needed someone to make me feel alive again. You just got so complacent. Complacent? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. I spent months trying to connect, trying to understand, trying to fix whatever was broken. I bought you gifts, I planned dates, I tried to talk. You shut me down every single time. Every attempt was met with a sigh, an eye roll, a key. Not now, I'm tired. That wasn't complacency on my part, Sarah. That was rejection on yours. Maybe I just fell out of love, she said, her voice flat, devoid of real emotion. It happens, but you made it so hard you wouldn't let go. I wouldn't let go, or you didn't want to let go of the security? I asked. You wanted your freedom, your new life, but you didn't want to deal with the messy business of leaving. You wanted me to be the bad guy, the cold, distant husband who pushed you away, so you could be the victim. She flinched, but didn't respond directly. The silence was heavy, filled with the weight of years of unspoken truths. You didn't want a partner, Sarah, I continued, the realization sharp and clear in my mind. You wanted a safety net, a convenient placeholder while you found someone else. You wanted the option of me, while exploring all your other options. And when I finally became quiet, when I finally stopped validating your narrative of my coldness, when I stopped reacting exactly how you needed me to, that's when you got angry. Because my silence made you irrelevant. My silence meant you couldn't blame me anymore. She finally broke eye contact, her shoulders slumping. There was no confession, no dramatic apology, just a quiet resignation that I had seen through her. So, what do you want? She asked, her voice barely audible. I want out, I said, the words clean and precise. I want out of this performance, out of this manipulation. I want a real life, with real emotions, not whatever this has become. She nodded slowly, still not looking at me. It was as if she had been waiting for me to say those words, perhaps hoping I would, perhaps dreading the effort involved. There was no visible pain, no tears, no argument, just an almost palpable sense of relief from her. The next few weeks were a blur of practicalities, the house, the finances, the logistics. We spoke little, and when we did, it was purely transactional. The emotional chasm that had opened between us months ago had now become a gaping canyon. There was no fighting, no shouting. Just a quiet, sterile dismantling of a life we had built together. A life that, for her, had apparently been nothing more than a temporary arrangement. I moved into a small apartment, leaving her in the house we had bought together, the house filled with memories that were now tainted. The silence in my new place was different. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of her emotional withdrawal, or the tense quiet of my suspicion. This was a clean silence, a hopeful silence. It was the sound of a slate being wiped clean, of a story ending, and a new one waiting to begin. It hurt, of course. It hurt to realize how deeply I had been played, how easily I had been made to doubt my own perceptions. But the pain was mingled with a fierce sense of clarity. She didn't want me to stop loving her. She just wanted me to stop needing her. And when I finally did, she needed someone to blame. But I wouldn't let it be me anymore. My coldness had been a shield, not a weapon. And in the end, it was the only thing that saved me.